What's an Elden Ring video without an arbitrary boss ranking? Now, ranking the Elden Ring bosses is a bit tricky, as all 238 enemies considered bosses in the game aren't all unique encounters, and there's a lot of repeated bosses, and I mean a lot of them. More powerful versions of the same bosses, normal enemies who are given health bars, and so on. So, some ground rules are in order. Rule number 1, generic/late game enemies that have been given boss health bars don't count unless stated otherwise. No Patrick, Beastman of Farum Azula, and Stone Digger Troll are not actual bosses. Rule number 2, if the boss is repeated or has multiple versions, like Phantom Godfrey versus the full Godfrey/Hoaraloo fight, I'll only discuss the more powerful version of the boss, as these weaker bosses are usually just the first phase of the full fight. Rule number 3, if the boss is indeed a repeated enemy boss type, I'll only count it if the boss is required, either to complete the game or to access other bosses, like Margit or the Red Wolf of Radagon, despite the former being a weaker version of the full fight later, and the latter being an upgraded enemy boss. And rule number 4, if bosses are extremely similar, I'll group them together and count them as one entry. For example, Fortisax and Landsax, the Crucible Knights, all the Erdtree Avatars, Knights Cavalry, Deathbirds, Flying Dragons, so on and so forth. They're all coming together for one boss. This list is just my opinion, and is ranked based on my own personal enjoyment of each fight. You probably won't agree with it, and that's totally fine. And feel free to share your own thoughts and rankings, or give me a verbal lashing for my dogshit gamer opinions. But alright, no more fucking around. Let's get started with the worst boss.
What the fuck were they thinking?
Simply the worst boss in the game, hands down. In a seemingly vain attempt to recapture the magic of the Ornstein and Smo skinny guy fat guy double battle, the boss we are required to kill before taking on Malekith shoves us in a room with a Godskin Noble and Apostle, two bosses whose movesets don't complement each other whatsoever, making the fight a drawn-out slog where you bait one to attack you, fight it, and try to dodge and manage the other's attacks, with the Godskins trading aggro every so often. Not only that, the boss fucking lies to you, as it's more of a Godskin trio and a half, and if you defeat one, the other will respawn it not too long after, and you defeat the boss by draining the health bar fully, not just slaying the two Godskins. Just breaking the boss fight into 2 health bars for the Apostle and Noble would have been a better choice in my opinion, but that still wouldn't save it much. It's seemingly thrown together, and it's simply not a very fun battle. D tier. It's Gang Squad Reborn, but at least they're way weaker this time, and they have an actual structure to the fight, as you fight a ghostly NPC champion first, then Rogier, then Lionel the Lionhearted, this game's funny fat armor guy, alongside 2 other champions. They're effectively no different than any given NPC invader, and you can deal with them as such. It's hardly a boss, more like a combat trial more than anything, and you'll cut through these guys with little trouble. C tier. Definitely my least favorite Remembrance boss. Fire Giant has some incredible size and spectacle to him, and I'm pretty sure he's the largest From Software boss that isn't limited to being stuck in one place like the Dragon God, and my Tarnish only reaches up to about his ankle. But this size is the only thing he's really got going for him, as the rest of the fight is a total slog. Fire Giant is an absolute ocean of health, and you can only do significant damage by hitting his raw ankle weak spot, or in his second phase, his chest and his meaty wrists, which you barely get the chance to hit, as they're out of reach most of the time. His attacks are massive, but slow, so once you learn his movesets, the fight is just a slow grind of slicing up his feet and ankles until you reach his second form, where he then awakens his fell god visage on his chest in a really cool and brutal cutscene, where he tears off his broken leg and sacrifices it. Damn, that's tough. But I respect it. And he starts using super powerful pyromancies, which can deal massive explosive damage if you aren't careful. And you sure as hell don't want to have to redo the entire fight because a firebomb nuked your health bar. It's slow, careful, and heavily punishes the player with flame pyromancies that can end your run off just one mistake. Just not really a fan of this one, to be honest. C tier. A weak but endlessly annoying boss who zips around the arena teleporting into black clouds, who then quickly reappears to unleash a flurry of attacks. I'm not sure if I'm just a scrub or what, but this guy was giving me conniptions for a while as I whiffed attacks, and he teleported right into a multi-hit combo to obliterate me. And his shadowy design made it hard for me to see him as well. But the design itself is really cool. He's a gaunt, wholly black and shadowy humanoid with some bug-looking parasites stuck to his head. He looks like he'd be right at home in Bloodborne, some Witch of Hemwick shade-looking dude. It's okay. C tier. I absolutely love the design of this guy. He's a skeleton boatman with a horn to summon skeletons to fight alongside him, and he attacks using his boat itself. And I love dodging the massive boat blasts and watching him boat around the arena, but I can't place him any higher than this because he's simply too easy. He's incredibly slow, passive, and pretty weak overall, even on his massive boat wave slam, which is incredibly slow and easy to dodge. And he mostly relies on his summoned skeletons to keep you occupied, as if you get too close to him, you can pretty much just wail on him endlessly. I love the design, but he's just way too easy. C tier. It's what the fuck is even happening boss if I've ever fought one. And the Ulcerated Tree Spirit is this massive fleshy tree serpent thing that's been snorting way too much Miranda powder. Despite his size, he can move extremely quickly and has some huge flying moves. And I really like his one move where he hops up into the air, hangs for a bit, and then closes in with a huge flying bite attack. And dodging that attack is always so visually and mechanically satisfying to pull off. But his massive size and speed make the fight crusty as hell, as the game has a hard time keeping up with the damn thing and its erratic movements. And when closing into attack, you lose sight of its entire model, making incoming attacks pretty hard to see. It's still a pretty fun fight overall, but its camera issues and the high speed of the fight make it a total clusterfuck. C tier.
Well, of course I know him. He's me.
Who doesn't love a good mirror match, huh? Well, me. I only like them, at best. Mimic tier copies your character stats and gear, and forces you to overcome your own build. And it was not fun to have that bloody slash thrown back in my face. But despite this unique setup, it's just your standard human NPC fight. Room temperature AI and all. And you can take down Mimic tier as you would any other invader. It's alright. It's not subtle or nuanced, but it's alright. C tier.
I knew you'd come.
The all-knowing who really doesn't know shit. Seriously. Bro didn't know where Mikola and Moog were. He didn't know how to obtain the Erdtree medallions. He doesn't know what America's plans are at all, nor how to become Elden Lord. He has no feats, and has never obtained a single great rune in his untold years of running the Round Table Hold. And worst of all, he uses a fucking magic build. More like Gideon Ofnir. Anyway, Gideon has a war chest of powerful sorceries to vaporize you with, and he's constantly trying to separate himself from you so he can use his magical heavy artillery. But at the end of the day, he's still just an enemy human NPC, so his battle can only get so challenging. And you can comically obliterate him with an overpowered skill or Ash of War if you want. And as long as you don't get double tapped by his glintstone shots or heavy explosions, he goes down pretty quick. No tarnish can become Elden Lord. Get the fuck out of here. Gothic horse riders that only appear at, well, night. And there are a ton of these guys. I think there's like 10 of them all across the map. Some devious Control-C and Control-Ving from the devs. They can either wield flails or halberds, and the rider and the horse have separate health bars. So if you kill the horse, you get to take on the cavalry on foot until he summons another gothic steed. Despite the intimidating all-black armor and their horse covered in a scary black sheet, the knights' cavalries are surprisingly bog-standard rider enemies, swinging their weapons from horseback and having their horse try and slam or buck you occasionally. And they sort of feel like the tree sentinels, without any of the added shield arts or draconic magic moves, making them fairly forgettable, and overshadowed by their yellow fellows. C tier.
When I met you in the summer.
A bit of an exception, as Red Wolves of Radagon start showing up as generic field enemies later on in the game, but you need to defeat this one before you fight Rennala, so here he is. Red Wolf of Radagon is an interesting beast fight because he can use glintstone sorceries on top of some pretty flashy sword attacks, and is constantly darting around the arena, giving the fight a pretty breakneck pace. And you'll probably get whacked hard a few times misreading a bite, or getting hit by his incredibly fast glintstone jump shot. But the wolf itself is pretty weak, and I was able to shred his health bar pretty quickly with Bloody Slash and a few jump attacks. Overall, a pretty solid, but forgettable fight. High C tier.
Oh, Jesus Christ!
Astel probably has the most unique design of any boss in Elden Ring, as up until you encounter him, you'll be fighting your typical dark fantasy fare, decrepit and massive knights, dragons, and beasts of all shapes and sizes. That is, until you progress through the underground areas and come face to face with this fucking thing, this massive alien winged centipede thing with a hollowed out human face, a massive eye on its forehead, and large bug pinchers. What the fuck? Elden Ring can have a little cosmic horror, for fun. It's another boss design that I love, and everything about his presentation, design, and music is fantastic, but the fight itself is a bit irritating, unfortunately. Astel's weak spot is his head, and hitting his balled up limbs will do some pretty paltry damage. So my strategy was to powerbomb his head to win, and most of the fight is you struggling to get your positioning right to whack his head. All the while his moveset is full of massive get off me moves like his gravity slam and pulsating AoE attacks, his backpedals, and teleportations, solidly dragging out the fight's pace. And his teleport can also be used to cover for a grab attack that will likely one-hit KO you if you aren't at full health, and he can appear to grab you from any random angle. And my best strategy to avoid this move was to just spin the camera wildly when he vanishes, then hope you can spot him and react to his grab before he gives you that cosmic chomp. But having to chase after him constantly and him being fairly hard to hit consistently makes this fight unsatisfying for me personally. It's just not one of my favorites. High C tier. Another common field boss, the Flying Dragons had some pretty awesome size to Elden Ring's boss lineup, and there are several versions of this dragon boss. each with unique elemental breaths, like fire, glintstone flame, scarlet rot, ice, and so on. And these breath attacks are by far their best weapons, as I've had many dragon fights end when I got cremated by their flying breath blast moves after getting caught out of position. And these attacks are so powerful, they even damage the frame rate. But besides their massive breaths, these dragons are really no sweat. Their physical attacks are slow stomps, tail swipes, massive bites, and the occasional aerial slam, all of which are very easy to read and react to, making these fights just a slow go of hitting the dragon's ankles and head, and fleeing when the dragon decides to light it up, making the fight slightly unengaging, especially once you've fought multiple dragons. It can get pretty frustrating when you spend several minutes methodically whittling down its health, only to get double tapped by its massive fire breath attacks, making me place them here, high C tier. Another fairly common boss type that appears multiple times in the lands between. Magma Wyrms are these gigantic draconic salamanders who attack with massive lava blasts and slow but powerful sword swings, and they're some pretty tanky bastards. The first phase is straightforward, just dodge his slow jawbone club swings and stay away from the lava pools he spits out, but this phase goes to shit real quick when the worm decides to charge, where he spews lava and chases the player, and he may do this move multiple times in a row, and when you're trying to fight a worm in any semi-enclosed space, it gets pretty annoying, to say the least. And in his second phase, the worm actually stands up, pukes lava all over his sword, and now has some insanely slow, yet devastating attacks, like this huge overhead slam that's not easy to get the dodge timing just right. But juke these haymakers and keep the pressure on, and the salamander will go down no problem. It's a decent battle, but the fairly simplistic and slow moveset, and the sometimes infuriating charge spam they seemingly love to do, makes me put him here. High C tier.
Peter, the horse is here.
The Elden Ring Noob Slayer. Bless him for that. The Tree Sentinel is probably the first enemy you'll ever see once you take your first steps into Limgrave, and he is a perfect representation of the open world's design philosophy. You can try to take him on right away if you think you got the sauce, but 9 out of 10 players won't stand a chance at the start, forcing you to explore, get stronger, get comfortable, get better items, and come back when you think you're ready. And its implementation is damn near perfect. The actual boss fight itself, however, is nothing too special. He's a rider type enemy who attacks with massive and fun to dodge halberd swings and some huge shield attacks you gotta watch out for. He's got this poor horse jumping around like it's in the NBA. It's a fun, but pretty straightforward fight that's great for getting used to attack timings and pacing for future battles. Also, the Tree Sentinel has some sick armor. I was rocking the Tree Sentinel set for the entire second half of this playthrough. Damn, I got that shit on. But fuck the gank version of this fight. Yui Tanimura, you dirty bastard. B tier. On their own, the Gargoyles are some pretty fun and challenging bosses. These lanky bastards probably have the most cursed gargoyle design of all time. They look like they're composed of large rotting corpse parts grafted together. And if you look closely, you can see it has 2 faces stuck together. Fucking yuck. The Gargoyles fight with 2 weapons that they can swap between, being either a sword and halberd or an axe and a twin blade. And they will swap between them to change up the fight tempo, which I really like, as it keeps the fights varied and dangerous, on top of the pretty fast pace they attack you at, making each gargoyle a pretty dangerous encounter, and each weapon it uses has its own powerful unique attack. The gargoyle can use its sword to swing wildly at you, use the axe to create huge earthquake AoEs, and the halberd and the twin blade are the worst, as the gargoyle turns into a damn tornado, and puts your ass in a blender if you're even slightly off on your dodges, giving you almost no respite. Each singular gargoyle and Blackblade Kindred encounter is difficult, yet really fun, but the Valiant Gargoyles fight in the Aqueduct is some bullshit if I've ever seen it, and it's for one main reason: the poison. Not only do you have to fight 2 gargoyles, they now have this massive fuck-off poison AoE that has insane reach, and does pretty strong damage just for standing in it, making your character recoil from the poison damage, leaving you extra vulnerable to getting hit by the other gargoyle, and it's just a total wash. But I still enjoy the singular gargoyle fights well enough to make this a B tier.
Run.
The true final boss of the game, and the living embodiment of the Elden Ring itself. Hey, that's the name of the game. And this may very well be the most visually striking boss that FromSoft has ever crafted. Everything about this boss's look and presentation is sublime. The see-through cosmic body of the beast with the golden root-looking veins, well, at least I think they're veins, look absolutely fantastic. And the boss arena and music just add even more to the experience. Seeing the other Erdtrees towering in the distance give the boss a real sense of mystery and power that seems almost undefeatable. And the attack where he rises into the air is just visually spectacular. It's almost perfect. If only the fight itself was just as good as the presentation. The Elden Beast fight itself is pretty underwhelming and frankly pretty annoying at times. And I feel like I'm running the damn pacer test, rather than throwing hands with the vassal of some unknowable outer god of Golden Order. The beast uses huge incantations and slow sword swings, and most of the fight will have you sprinting around the massive arena trying to avoid the long and massive incantations, and trying to catch up with the beast after it swims away from you. To defeat the cardio beast, you must become like Usain Bolt. How do you dodge its massive ringed explosion attack? Run to the right and jump over the closing hoops to escape. How to avoid its hail of light? Run to the right and don't stop. How to avoid its homing gold ball thing? Run, Tarnished, run. And finally, you have to run right up to him and combo him with that jump slam. Rinse and repeat until his health bar is 0. This battle is clearly much more focused on its spectacle, rather than trying to be a brutally challenging yet satisfying final boss. And although the presentation is literally God tier, I'd still prefer the latter. B tier. The weird, fuzzy-faced rock horse thing from outer space will have you feeling like an actual matador, as it'll charge you down, buck and tail whip you, and even blast rocks at you. And these rock attacks are vicious. They come out really quick, and it's a bit hard to tell just how large the rock hitbox is, and I got blasted more than a few times. Once you get his health down far enough, he'll even bust out some gravity magic on you, like earth-bending rocks up to attack you, using a gravity well slam, and even a purple gravity blast on top of his fast movements and attack speed, making this boss a lot more imposing than I expected. The full-grown Fallingstar Beast gave my endgame character a pretty good thrashing, and I was struggling to avoid his fast tail whips and slams, gravity magic, and mostly his rock shotgun blasts, making for an almost overwhelming encounter that I enjoy quite a bit. It's always fun to dodge out of the way of these huge charges like I'm some kind of bullfighter. B tier.
I think my scary, otherworldly, shadowy spirit friends might have something to say about that.
These elemental generals are some pretty unique enemies, attacking you with massive sweeping halberd attacks, and I really like how his standard flag is wrapped around it. It's such a sweet little detail. And on top of these huge elemental sweeping attacks, Niall can also attack with his electrified leg prosthesis, and I'm a really big fan of his epic jump slam, but I'm not a big fan of his fast electric slash slam. This shit comes out insanely fast and does a devastating amount of damage, and I can almost never react in time. Gotta love late game Elden Ring scaling. Also, when the fight starts, these commanders, like their name suggests, summon soldiers to fight alongside them, which forces the first phase of this fight to be fully dedicated to crowd control and killing his summoned peons before they bend you over from behind when you aren't looking. And I feel like this fight could probably do without them. That's just my personal preference, as I find it just distracts and drags out from a pretty good overall fight every single time you attempt it. But luckily, I never had much trouble offing these guys, so I could start the fight proper. And once it's a 1v1, it's a fun and pretty dangerous fight that requires you to be able to position yourself far away from his massive elemental swings and dodging his huge prosthesis slams, making the fight a brutally fun challenge for me. B tier. The Deathbirds are one of the most fascinating boss types in all of Elden Ring, allegedly being the keepers of death in the time before the Erdtree. And when it was your time to go, these horrifying monstrosities would come and burn your body and soul with their ghost flame imbued rakes. God damn, I think I'd rather get freaky with the Erdtree roots than get incinerated by this fucking thing. Maybe the Golden Order ain't so bad, cause this ghost flame is nuts. The Deathbirds attack with fast ghost flame swings, explosions, and area of effects, and he even has a massive spectral spear storm that shoots out of his ghost flame wings, and the wings just look so damn cool. You can see the spirits of old death priests standing within the wings, and it looks awesome. Elden Ring's boss design details are just on another level. But fighting the Deathbird also means you'll be fighting the damn camera too. It's locking onto the bird, especially its head, will cause the camera to constantly swing around and end up at odd angles trying to keep up with the bird's movements and its repositioning, which caused me to lose sight of the pretty large bird model and led to several deaths and ass whoopings from attacks I could barely see or anticipate. So to succeed, you'll need to lock on and off constantly and change your lock-on targets to keep the bird in full view, which can be pretty annoying at times and can distract from the actual moment-to-moment battle. But I still found this fight to be pretty enjoyable. I love the ethereally disgusting bird design. Seriously, its body looks like petrified poop, and its wide range of attacks to master and avoid kept this battle a fun challenge for me. B tier. The second shard bearer I took down, and the mother of the gods Rykard, Ranni, and Radahn, is a solid, if fairly easy sorcerer boss. Rennala has two distinct phases. In the first phase will have you attacking the currently singing Slug Girl graduate thing. Seriously though, what the fuck are these things? 3 times in a row to burst Rennala's bubble, and then you wail on her until she performs her bubble, and repeat until her health is at 0. And this first phase is nothing more than a gimmick, and I see it as a bit of a waste of time actually. The singing slug graduate girls can't do much besides lob magic books and drop chandeliers on you, and the only fun I really have in this phase is seeing how much damage I can do to Rennala in a single cycle. But once you whoop her good enough, her second phase will start, where we have a showdown with Rennala in her prime, in this sweet looking full moon lake area. Rennala has some pretty powerful sorceries like the Shoop da Whoop, Moon Bomb, and at worst, she can summon either wolves, a Bloodhound Knight, a giant, or a damn dragon to temporarily back her up, which will force you off her for a time, as going for an attack while she's got Spirit backup is a good way to get dogged from behind until you're 6 feet under. But once they vanish, all you have to do is close the gap and beat her around while avoiding her sorceries, as her weak poise lets you get in some pretty heavy hits on her, and soon enough, she'll be dusted. She's probably the weakest shard bearer, at least for me, and her first phase is pretty unengaging and overlong, but her second phase makes up for it well enough, and she manages to be a decent sorcerer boss. B tier.
I hate my life.
I hate your life too, dude.
A cross between a dragon and a troll, these massive abominations are failed imitations of the immortal ancient dragons, and they can use powerful lightning ice magic on top of 10,000 different slam attacks. These bosses are huge, and I had trouble seeing what move he was about to do when up close, as the model is just that big. But besides these camera issues, it's a fairly standard large enemy fight. Once it's damaged enough, it'll awaken its ice lightning and sprout some wimpy fucked up wings, changing up the fight quite a bit. He now launches huge lightning strike AoEs, lobs bolts at you like old Gwyn himself, and he now has way bigger jump attacks and slams. And some of these attacks look visually incredible. I love watching a boss jump up to prepare to destroy you with a huge flying slam attack, and getting that timing down to perfectly dodge it is just so damn satisfying. And if these lightning attacks don't kill you, they'll kill your frame rate, cause goddamn this shit is chugging bad. The second phase of this fight, minus the frame rate hits, is a great change up in escalation and danger from the first phase, and it makes this boss a pretty memorable one. I just love the electric aura effects, the decrepit wings he grows, and the visual spectacle his new attacks bring. High B tier. A hidden remembrance boss that you can find by lighting 6 flame pillars in the Siofra River area, and then interacting with the glowing deer corpse to get teleported to the boss arena. And this fight is pretty damn beautiful. The music invokes some real naturalistic mystery and grace to the ghostly deer boss, and I really love it paired with his moves where he jumps and floats for a time in the air. It's great. This is what the ancient Celts must have saw in their drug-fueled visions. However, despite the great presentation, the boss is pretty easy, using pretty slow and clearly telegraphed horn swipes, flying slams, and kicks, and unlike some bosses, who have seemingly undodgeable moves, Regal Ancestor Spirit seemingly has unhittable moves, like when he runs up into the air, spraying his Regal Ancestor Goop Miasma all over the ground, which lands right in front of him. So as long as you aren't directly underneath him when he does this move, this shit will never hit you. The Regal Ancestor Spirit can also restore his health, which is a great way to make me hate your boss, but it's actually to this deer's benefit, as otherwise this fight would simply be too easy. But overall, it's a beautiful, if simple boss. High B tier.
I'm white!
The Skinny One. These skin-suited Mayo monkeys used to be the foot soldiers of the Gloam-Eyed Queen, a mysterious Empyrean who would use her Godskin soldiers to flay and kill the gods themselves. But it's unsure if they were assassins, a hostile army, or something else completely. The Apostle attacks with his Godskin White Flame and Peeler, a dual-edged spear and curved sword that he can take advantage of with a combination of stabs and slashes. And when damaged enough, he goes Extendo Snake mode, unleashing a tornado of attacks and extending his attack reach greatly. And most of your troubles in this fight will come from you learning how to avoid these massive reach attacks, like his massive flame AoE and the move I like to call the Blender, where he spins his peeler right in front of him and tries to blend up your character like he's trying to throw you into a plane turbine. But once you get a good feel for his new range and where to stand to avoid his reach, the Apostle is really no problem, and it's just a solid overall fight from there. High B tier. The Fat One, who has the same flame powers of his skinny brethren, but attacks with a massive rapier and his sizable belly itself. I put the Noble over the Apostle because I find the rapier more visually engaging and satisfying to dodge, and I always feel juicy as fuck dodging out of the way of his flurry of stabs and his subsequent mega stab attacks. And once you get him down to half health, he busts out his second phase, where he gets even bigger, and starts rolling at you like a wild boulder. And I didn't realize you have to dodge right into it to avoid it, as if you try to dodge to the side or the back, you're gonna get hit. And it's not very clear that you can dodge right through him, as this model is fucking huge, so I didn't know that the iframes will last that long. So my original strategy was just to perfectly position myself behind a pillar and wait for what feels like minutes until he decides to stop tumbling. But outside of this rolling chicanery, it's a very fun fight, and it's my preferred Godskin to match up against. High B tier.
How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man?
The Lord of Stormvale and the first shard bearer you fight, who is ironically the weaker of the two boss battles here. Godrick's boss fight is a great lesson in positioning, as his attacks are huge and long, unleashing a long flurry of axe strikes, huge ground slams that blow up a large area, ranged whirlwind attacks, and a rolling gap closer you have to dodge. Godrick does well at teaching the player that sometimes, the best way to dodge an attack is to just simply run out of the way. But this focus on positioning makes this fight a pretty methodical one, mostly waiting out attacks for openings to run in and jump attack before running away to wait for the next one. And in his second phase, Godrick loudly amputates one of his many arms to graft a dragon head to it, nasty bitch. And his new dragon arm imbues his whirlwind and gap closer rolls with fire, and he can use the dragon's fire breath to deny huge parts of the arena, forcing the player to steer even clearer from these flames on top of the wild axe swinging. But once you get his attacks down, you just gotta keep your distance when he's spurging out or blasting fire, run in to punish, and repeat until the bastard goes down and we claim his rune. He's not my favorite Shardbearer to fight by any means, but his strikingly grotesque design and his wide range of attacks that teach the player about managing battles and proper positioning was always a challenging and engaging fight, even if it's nothing too special. High B tier. The cooler, immortal predecessors of the feathered flying dragons, and goddamn they're pretty big. I'll be talking about the two ancient dragon siblings, Landsax and Fortisax, who have massive red electric attacks, with Landsax using a massive electric glaive, and Fortisax using an electric spear that creates 4 massive directional waves, on top of lightning or deathblade area strikes to keep away from. They're faster than their flying dragon cousins, and have deadlier and longer reach for their slam attacks, and they can really pound your ass if you aren't careful. My only issue with these bosses, and this is becoming a bit of a trend, is that due to their massive size, when you run into attack one, you lose sight of more than half the dragon's model, making attacks really hard to see and react to, leading to a lot of extra hits. But besides these size issues, these are some pretty epic and engaging fights, and I love the electric aural effects coming off the dragons. It just makes them seem even more powerful and dangerous, and it makes you feel like a damn living god for felling one. Plus the scale of some of these attacks, like Landsax's glaive, are just absolutely incredible. High B tier. The Erdtree's little goons. Although these guys aren't that special, mostly just swinging their massive staves around, and doing a very Wario-esque butt slam that spreads either Scarlet Rot or Golden Energy based on the avatar type. But despite these simple movesets, I just find these guys so much fun to fight, and I try to challenge myself to not get hit once when fighting them. Dodging these slow but powerful staff attacks feel great, and once you know how to best avoid their laser barrages, just run away and dodge in rhythm. These bosses are always a blast to square up to. High B tier.
Just because you don't see the beast, it doesn't mean the beast isn't there.
I'm counting the Sword and Spear Knights together as one entry, as I believe that they're spiritually the same. The Crucible Knights are like the Black Knights of Elden Ring, strong and dangerous knights that always make your booty clench up when you encounter one out in the field. And their first phases are pretty straightforward, being full of aggressive attack combos, and these guys won't give you much space to breathe. The Sword Knight is definitely reading some inputs, as if you try to run away from him and heal, he seems to always curiously go for that huge gap closer. But once you get them down to half health, they start busting out their crucible abilities, like growing wings for a flying stab or flying slam, and they can also use a tail whip or a clawed grab that can obliterate 2/3 of your health bar. They're stronger, but they're open to bigger punishes, making the second phases ironically slightly easier than the first. But overall, they're properly dangerous, have some really great designs, and they're just very fun to fell. High B tier. The Horseback Sorcerer, being able to attack with their glaive like the Tree Sentinels, as well as unleashing several powerful sorceries while in the saddle, like conjured swords, massive glintstone arrows, and orb barrages, giving her the potential to absolutely decimate your health with spell combos if you aren't careful. And her second phase gives her even more magic to work with, like even more swords and a multi-shot spectral arrow. Loretta brought the glintstone rifle to a sword fight. It's an interesting twist on the Rite boss type, and it makes her dangerous at any distance, and you gotta learn how to best dodge her magic bullets, making for a pretty great overall battle. High B tier.
Use the Force, Luke.
Equipped with one of the coolest boss weapons in the game, Elemer here has the ability to use the Force, and can swing his sword through the air without even touching it, with some sweet red effects to show you that he ain't using no hands. And it's a really cool gimmick that forces you to keep an eye on both his sword and his body, as his body movements telegraph his attacks. And the sword has a huge effective range to hit you from, making everywhere in the arena unsafe. And this fight is challenging, almost overwhelmingly so from the barrage of range and close-up sword attacks, making this fight another great encounter to learn to overcome. And you even get his sweet Force Sword for beating him, and I used it in my kit for a while despite its high arcane requirements, and its Ash of War turns it into a medieval power drill, and it absolutely decimates enemy poise. And it's an incredibly cool fight, with an even cooler weapon. A tier. My favorite non-remembrance rider type boss. These deep-fried tree sentinels are imbued with the power of the ancient dragons, and can use red lightning to power up their attacks and cast lightning bolt AoEs. And they even attack using a huge club made from a dragon claw. And also, their horse can breathe fire. How? Their club attacks leave huge shockwaves that can melt your health, and it gets even worse when they lightning up, making the attack shockwaves even bigger and stronger. And he can also hit you with this shield lightning strike that's got some weird dodge timing you have to master, as it hits slightly after he performs the attack animation. And it took me a little while to get the timing down just right. But overall, it's simply the most engaging rider battle, and dodging his massive electric slams is booty-clenchingly tense, but incredibly satisfying to pull off, and I was locked in for the entire fight. A tier. Here we go. The current final boss of Souls-like combat, and the lady who has never taken an L in her life, Malenia, Blade of, I mentioned earlier that this boss is broken, and simply put, she is. Rocking the ultimate dex build, Malenia has incredibly fast attacks, devastating grabs, health regen on hit, and this absolute nonsense you call the waterfowl dance. A nigh-on unavoidable barrage of strikes that will delete your health bar if you're caught in it, forcing you to anticipate it and run away like Shaggy and Scooby-Doo when you see her prepare it, or use Bloodhound's Step to blink out of existence and avoid it that way. It only gets worse in her second phase, as she now has a rot-imbued waterfowl dance, massive rot blooms, and even this insane-looking shadow clone assault attack. Also, looks like Miyazaki and the boys are feeling a bit freaky making this design. Sweet wing effects though. Now you can try to take her on one-on-one, getting pounded into the dirt repeatedly, mastering your Bloodhound Step dodges, and learning what it means to have true humility. Or you can call in some backup, and make the fight much more manageable. Which is what I did. Thanks Tish, I needed that achievement. And unless you're an absolute god of Souls-like combat, and a god of patience too, I do not recommend taking on Malenia one-on-one, as the fight is simply not balanced in your favor, and you're going to have a pretty rough time. But using summons brings the difficulty down from around a 12 out of 10 to a much more manageable 7 out of 10, as you and your ghostly henchmen will be able to break Malenia's poise quickly, and you can even knock her flat on her ass with enough power, and then the fight becomes a chaotic brawl where you run in for hits, backpedal to dodge, and repeat. Malenia's fight borderlines an experimental game design, and although I do enjoy its unique existence as a sort of ultimate Souls-like challenge, I wish it was more tuned to be a proper one-on-one duel, without it being an absolutely miserable slog. But the fantastic story connotations and the incredible presentation make this battle a broken, but extremely memorable fight, even if it's not one of my favorites. A tier.
What the fuck?
Probably the most fascinating boss in the entire game, Dragonlord Placidusax is the leader of the ancient dragons, and their former Elden Lord to an unknown god that fled from them a long time ago. To access this fight, you gotta go to this unassuming floating platform in Farum Azula and lay down in the empty grave, which causes time to seemingly stop and reverse, and it rebuilds the fantastic looking boss arena, revealing Placidusax suspended in the air, seemingly awaiting something. Its presentation is absolutely incredible, and approaching the motionless Dragonlord in the massive reconstructed arena looks absolutely incredible. His decrepit design is amazing as well, and it looks as if the dragon is a broken hand, seemingly missing several heads, or fingers if you will, with its entire body wrapped in its own necks. He's pretty slow to start, summoning lightning and breathing fire to keep you off of him, and attacks physically with these electric clawed swipes and this spear explosion I couldn't for the life of me get the dodge timing right on. This move was constantly blowing my ass up. Once he's been damaged enough, he starts teleporting around to attack and get away from you, and he introduces a massive flying claw strike that leaves a huge AoE in its wake, and I could only fully dodge this move around half of the time. Those massive explosion hitboxes are just too strong for me. He also gets this awesome looking double laser breath attack, and this might be my favorite attack in the entire game visually. It just looks so damn cool. But once you master how to properly dodge and position yourself against this old bastard, it goes down like the rest of his kin. What a great fight. A tier.
I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes about diabetes.
Another of the demigods, and another somewhat unfair fight, but handled in a much better way than Malenia. Radahn is an absolute force of nature, even though he's half dead and footless from a full body affliction of divine syphilis that he got in his fight from Malenia. That's just how much of a beast he is. From the back of his beloved and emaciated horse Leonard, Radahn is fast and overwhelming with his attacks. But you also have some help, as you can touch several summon signs to summon NPCs to fight alongside you. And I always summon these guys, for lore purposes. For years, Radahn's remaining followers have been trying to give him a proper warrior's death, and they hold a Radahn festival at Redmane Castle, where warriors from all over come to fight him, and I'd be doing them a disservice to not summon them. Hell, there's even a hidden joke in this battle, as if you summon Patches, he will shortly leave after being summoned, seemingly shitting his pants in complete fear of Radahn. Such a great little detail. And the battle is designed with these summons in mind, as they pull Radahn's aggro for you to get hits in, and they can be resummoned if they're defeated, as they have several summon signs all over the massive arena, and the NPCs themselves don't do much damage to Radahn. But, if you want to, you can still just take him one-on-one if you so desire, and I usually fight his second phase one-on-one, as he starts busting out gravity magic attacks, summons gravity projectiles and boulders he holds onto for way too long, Bro's edging me as I'm waiting for these rocks to just come at me. And we'll do these really awesome flying corkscrew attacks, and we'll even jump up incredibly high into the air, disappearing for a bit before rocketing back down to earth like a fucking meteor. It's nuts, and I absolutely love it. It's got some incredible spectacle just from the attacks alone, and it's not too overwhelming or unfair to fight him one-on-one if you're familiar enough with his game, making for a monumental battle against a monumental foe. A tier.
I just woke up in a fucking steaming mood, yeah? Because I live in a shithole!
The first big boy boss many players face. Margit appears to be some sort of tarnish-hating, homeless old man Sasquatch beast who attacks with his walking cane. But this old man has a lot to teach you young bloods. And Margit is an almost perfect tutorial for later bosses. He has ranged and melee attacks you have to avoid, light and heavy attacks he switches between, like when he busts out his giant gold hammer or unleashes a golden sword and cane flurry. And most importantly, he teaches you how to anticipate and react to delayed attacks with his overhead cane slam and his delayed combo swings. It's a basic and straightforward fight compared to the others on this list. And hell, it isn't even this guy's final form. But Margit sets such a great bar for future bosses, and it gets you familiar with all kinds of attack types and timings, making this one of FromSoft's best tutorial bosses to date. A tier.
He's full of dickheads! I fucking hate it!
The previously mentioned final form of Margit, his true self Morgoth, the Omen child of Marika and Godfrey. Margit was just some sort of projected illusion, and you can even fight another Margit clone out in the open in the Altus Plateau. That's the real homeless one. Morgoth cracks open his walking cane to reveal a magic sword that looks like it's made out of oily puddle water, and he's got some new tricks to take us on with. He's got all his old moves on top of some pretty crazy mobility. This dude Morgoth is a damn gymnast, somersaulting and sliding all over the arena, making his attacks much faster in this fight. He's also got a new radial spear storm move that's pretty easy to avoid, and a golden spear charge that's pretty hard to get the proper timing down on. And in his second phase, he unleashes his accursed blood flame in a last-ditch attempt to kill you. And it's pretty sick. This battle is fast and brutal, but also incredibly fair, and it feels like the perfect challenge for the player at this point in the game. And it's just an overall incredible battle. And when you defeat him, he shrivels up into this charred skeleton man, saying that we'll never be able to access the Erdtree, as it's blocked off by impassable thorns. Morgoth has had a pretty tough life. He was born in Omen, is scorned by all, even his own family, and was locked underground for who knows how long. But despite it all, he still fights for his family and the Erdtree, and he only uses his accursed blood when he's extremely desperate, denying himself extra power just to continue to cling to his ideals. And to protect the tree, he disguised himself as a homeless, tarnished, killing vagrant named Margit, who would deter any upstart Elden Lords from reaching the Erdtree, making him one of the most complicated and empathetic characters in the entire game. And I honestly kind of feel bad for killing him. He was just trying to do what he thought was right, and that's a sign that the fight is some pretty incredible shit. High A tier.
Stop! Hammer time!
The first half of the final boss, and the way better phase in my opinion. Although he may not be the flashiest, or even the hardest boss, his fight is so tightly designed and well executed, it makes me place it this high. Radagon's body, much like the Elden Ring itself, has been shattered, and I really like his fairly subtle design and the detail of the Elden Ring being visible in his chest cavity. He may look human, but his blank and vacuous expression and his shattered body give him an extremely inhuman and unsettling presence I really like. Radagon uses a mix of melee and powerful incantations, and most of his attacks leave large golden explosions, making some of his dodge timings incredibly tight and hard to pull off. And I even had to change the weapon I was using to get around his high holy resistance. I feel bad for any faith builds trying to take on this boss. He doesn't give you much room for error, or to breathe, and each hit feels pretty devastating, and the pressure is always on. It's a fight you really have to master, and I really enjoyed getting better and better at fighting him, learning his tells and how to best avoid his explosions. And it's so satisfying to get to the point where you can reliably beat him, and each swing of his hammer is forging you into becoming a better player, even if the inconsistent hits in the large explosion areas can be a little frustrating at times. And he's an excellent first phase of a final boss, and I just wish he wasn't followed up by the damn Cardio Beast, because we might have had an all-time great on our hands. But still pretty good. High A tier. Malekith is up there as being one of the hardest bosses in the game, even being harder than Radagon and the Cardio Beast in my opinion. Malekith starts off as Garank, the death-eating beast clergyman who has a really fast kit of dagger attacks and bestial incantations, like rock sling and claw projectiles. And the name of the game here is learning how to keep up with his pace and how to properly dodge his quick combos and attacks. And that shit ain't easy. The beast clergyman got some sneaky athleticism. But once he's down to half health, he then turns into his true form, the large armored wolf Malekith, who wields death itself in his massive sword, and this second phase is fucking nuts. It turns out that Malekith is actually half wolf, half Apache attack helicopter, spinning wildly in the air while shooting sword death rays at you, and the fight is constantly going airborne, Malekith keeps the pressure on you by jumping onto and off the pillars, and jumps up real high to slam down massive attacks on your head. And each hit temporarily weakens your health bar, and it also causes it to slowly burn, giving Malekith an insane damage output. And he also has this explosion move where he hops on his sword to generate a death explosion, or worst of all, this huge area of attack he creates after landing and plunging his sword into the ground, and if you're anywhere near it, you're getting hit. No question. But despite this brutal damage output, I found this fight to be insanely tense and really exciting. And when each attack has the potential to be deadly, it makes dodging these attacks feel even better. And I had a lot of fun trying to figure out when to best sneak in some attacks, and how to best punish this hyperactive mutt. And I love the visual spectacle of all his flying attacks, making this an extremely punishing, yet incredibly satisfying beast of a battle. A tier.
You dare bring light to my lair? You must die!
A gimmick fight in the top 3? Okay, hear me out. Rykard is the best gimmick fight FromSoft has made yet, and it's just so damn fun. The arena and boss designs are again fantastic, no surprise, and this arena might be the best in the game, and that's saying a lot. The hanging cages and chandeliers suspended from chains look incredibly striking, along with a sweet purple and orange color palette give this fight an almost otherworldly feel. But the gimmick of using the Serpent Hunter is where the fight really shines. The Serpent and Rykard are huge, and they deny you close access as the snake's body is constantly surrounded by lava, and you have to use the spear to hit him with an extendo wind poker, and you can rack up some pretty huge damage with consecutive hits, and it feels great to use, and it looks even cooler. This is some real anime shit we got going here. Giant snake versus giant wind spear, and it fucking rules. And once you kill the Serpent, Rykard reveals his nasty ass face and pulls a cursed meat sword out of his snake mouth to kill you with. And now you have to dodge his blasphemous blade swings and stabs. But your biggest problem will come if Rykard summons his evil shadow skull storm to endlessly pursue you. But luckily on my winning fight, he didn't even get the opportunity to summon it, making the fight considerably easier if you can interrupt him, or if you can get lucky and he doesn't use it at all. And God help you if he does use it, cause just look at this shit. But all that aside, it's a ridiculously fun fight with a really satisfying gimmick, and I always have a blast poking this freaky serpent fucker to death. And it's a fun changer from the normal combat that doesn't overstay its welcome, and it makes you feel like a total god. And also, his remembrance weapon is absolutely ridiculous. S tier.
There, why don't you have a seat right over there? Okay. At the stool.
Mohg is Morgoth's eviler, edgier brother. Seriously, Morgoth looks like some deformed homeless furry, whereas Mohg looks like a literal demon from the bowels of hell, complete with scary sharp teeth and evil black horns. But hey, at least he's got some sweet robes on. Mohg has captured the Empyrean Mikola, who is the owner of that decrepit hand reaching out of the fuzzy egg at the other end of the arena. Mohg has kidnapped Mickey here to try and become his consort and start some sort of dynasty of his own, despite them both being male. Betting the eternal child god. Yeah, I think we're gonna have to kill this guy. He attacks using his huge sweeping and stabbing trident and blood flame that he can throw vertically, horizontally, or make it rain on himself. And he can summon explosions with this really cool claw slash, even if the dodge timing is deceptively difficult to avoid. I always panic dodge as soon as I see the claw marks, and then I get obliterated. And the very lore behind these attacks are really interesting, as Mohg is literally cutting into and ripping apart the body of an outer god called the Formless Mother, and attacking us with the flaming blood from her wounds. And once you get him down to around half health, he starts his second phase with an unavoidable blood explosion countdown you have no other option than to just tank through, which will force you to burn some flasks. You can get a Crimson Tear through a questline to negate this damage. We ain't talking about that pussy shit. Now this would usually be a pretty bullshit mechanic, but at this point in the game, you're usually 12 to 13 flasks deep, and that just cuts into your supply a bit, giving you less room to make mistakes. And it actually makes the fight more engaging, without ever feeling unfair. It's odd, but I promise it actually works well for the fight. And after completing the countdown and restoring a decent chunk of his health, he sprouts wings and can now throw blood from up on high and do several flying attacks, which can be pretty hard to see at times when you're close to him, especially when he does this overhead jump slam. I literally could not see his whole model, which led to a few extra hits. And he also flings blood flame all over the arena with each attack, which do minimal damage, but your character still recoils from the hits, which made me panic a bit. But once I realized to not fear the floor blood, I was all good. And with enough patience and a few ass whoopings, I take down the Lord of Blood in a very close battle. Shit, he almost got me there. And it's such a great boss. From the soundtrack, the lore, the design, the arena, and his wide range of grounded and flying trident and blood flame incantations to master, makes Mohg an extremely challenging and exciting boss to take on. And he's one of my favorite FromSoft bosses, like ever. S tier.
Finger licking good special. That's what I'm talking about.
It's a tough call to make, and I could easily put Mohg here on any given day. But for now, I gotta go with the first Elden Lord as my pick for the best Elden Ring boss, We first meet him cradling his emaciated charred son Morgoth, and he then squares up to fight us. One final test to see if we have the strength needed to become the next Elden Lord. I'm so bricked. Godfrey has 2 phases. His Elden Lord phase, where he fights with an earth-shattering axe, swinging it around in wild combos, throwing it around from above, and even splitting the ground apart to blow up the entire area around him. And to beat him, you have to match his aggression and counter every opening he gives you, as he won't wait around for you to get in a swing or two, as he's constantly on the move. It's tough, and it's fair, and it's probably the closest we get to a pure melee one-on-one in this game. Once he's down to half health, he decides he's done fucking around, and he brutally rips apart the lion spirit on his back, which unleashes his bloodlust, turning him into his true identity, Horaloo the warrior. And now all he needs to obliterate you are these fucking hands. And he will constantly go in for massive grabs and grapples like he's fucking Baki or something. And he will launch your ass into the air to get powerbombed like we're in a godly WWE match. And while it sucks to get hit, it does look pretty cool. My ass is fucking cooked. And to win, you need to master his grapple and lunge timings and punish his misses. And it's so damn fun. And it feels like the most evenly matched battle in the entire game. And there's no unfair mechanics, gimmicks, or undodgeable attacks here. It's just pure, raw skill versus the greatest warrior the Lands Between has ever seen. And it all combines to make it my favorite battle in the game. S tier. And well, that's my list. Goodbye.